Since the day Bryan Kohberger was arrested, December 30th, 2022, and the world learned his name, we have been learning about Bryan Kohberger, his past, the person he was, the person he may be now, and what may have driven him to commit this horrific crime, if he is indeed guilty. It was on December 30th, 2022, the day Bryan Kohberger was arrested, the world learned about the research survey that Bryan Kohberger was conducting that he posted on Reddit that inquires into the minds of ex-cons, asking what they were thinking and feeling before, during, and after committing the crimes. In this video, you'll hear from the people that told us the story of Bryan Kohberger, people that actually knew him when he was younger and even as recently as when he was a teaching assistant at Washington State University, and also the experts that had insight into this real-life horror story.
Grisly murders of 4 college students in Idaho. A suspect arrested.
Bryan Kohberger.
Bryan Kohberger.
Bryan Kohberger.
I'm actually just from a very rural area.
The criminology PhD student showing little emotion.
I can actually see Bryan in my mind. Very solemn face.
Now when people talk about him, they notice, say, oh, he's got those eyes.
It did kind of send up a little bit of a sweat.
And I'm like, oh my God, that makes sense.
Girls still didn't like him and kept getting rejection after rejection.
I mean, he was a really nice guy.
I hope he's innocent.
I think there's a lot more to this story than meets the eye.
When we examine Bryan Kohberger's habits and behavior over time, the way he treated and interacted with women, the way he had difficulty sticking to something, seeing it through, either he'd quit it or he'd be forced out of it, and the online posts he'd been making since he was a teenager, I think these are indicators of somebody who is unstable, who might have some big trouble brewing in their life. Oh, I'm Kelly, creator of the true crime channel Watch the Obsession. I'm trained in behavioral therapy, and this is right up my alley.
But prosecutors made a point in their probable cause affidavit. They went into detail about this Reddit post that the defendant allegedly made, calling out to criminals to provide him with the reason why they chose their victims and committed their crimes. Now, I understand he studies this stuff, but this is still a little strange.
I have to agree with Vinnie Politano that Bryan Kohberger's research survey is a little bit strange. The full-length survey is quite long, and within it, it embodies 6 other surveys that you might take when you go to the doctor's office or go to see your therapist. There's an aggression survey, there's a guilt and shame survey within Bryan Kohberger's survey, and these are widely used tools for therapists or physicians to evaluate where a person is at. It is my opinion, and the opinion of some colleagues that I've spoken to about this, that these are qualities that Bryan Kohberger was concerned about having or not having in himself, and he put them in the survey in attempt to see if he could relate to others in that way. Am I a criminal because I have these qualities? Let's see if criminals relate to me. Do they have the same qualities?
Still a little strange.
Sounds like he's looking for the reasons why people do the things that they do. Maybe to answer the question for himself. Maybe to explain for him why he's motivated in the way that he is. Are you trying to figure out who you are, or are you trying to figure out who they are? And in this particular case, I think the prosecutors are going to say, yeah, this was about him trying to figure out who he is, because we can tell you who he is. He's this guy.
What do his studies tell you about Bryan Kohberger?
It's not that unusual for sadistic killers to study criminology. We think of the BTK killer in Kansas, the Golden State killer in California. Both had criminology degrees.
Bryan Kohberger's research survey was published in his senior year at DeSales University. Just a few months later, in the summer of 2022, Bryan Kohberger moved across country to Washington State University after being accepted into the criminology doctoral program. Here in this video, we're going to look forward in time, and then we're going to take a trip back and hear about what happened to Kohberger in high school. Lots of interesting things there, including a rap song he recorded.
Kohberger applies for an internship with the Pullman Police Department. In his application, he expresses an interest in helping cops, quote, better collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. He doesn't get the job, but he is hired as a teaching assistant. He has a number of issues on campus. As a student, it's claimed he's pushy, known for sitting front and center, quickly offering opinions, and regularly battling with female professors.
As we look at Bryan Kohberger, we start to learn about him as a person who is described by others as arrogant, having haughty attitudes, and that's certainly a personality structure that is consistent with one who might not look at others, including women, as his equal.
And off campus, he has issues as well, allegedly sneaking into a female friend's apartment and moving her furniture around.
Wow, that woman is damn lucky, and I'm going to let our friends from the podcast Killer Psyche explain the situation.
Back in the fall, months before the quadruple murders, in 2022, Bryan allegedly broke into the apartment of a friend of his, a coworker, a female coworker, and he started moving things around. He didn't take anything. He just moved things around. And that woman came to him and she said, I'm having a problem. I think there's somebody in my house moving things around. And he said, oh, well, I can install security cameras for you. Yeah. So he went and he installed security cameras that he had the password to. He's basically saying, hey, you have a problem. I can fix this problem. Look at me as a hero. And yet at the same time, he was using it to spy on her, allegedly. And yet the police are saying that they don't think that she was at all being targeted. They think that he was just doing that to watch her, to spy on her. What do you think about that?
Well, they would know, or they should be able to, working with the security company, assuming there was one, retrieve footage and see if he was actually watching her while she was going about her apartment life. And of course, that wouldn't surprise me. He is not alleged to have installed the security cameras. That's a fact. What we don't know, and what I do believe the police do know, is was he actually spying on her?
At the time of the Idaho student murders, Kohberger was a teaching assistant. And a few of his students came forward to say they noticed a difference in his behavior after the murders.
No reason to connect him to that, at the time, but definitely around then, he started grading everybody just 100s. He seemed preoccupied is what I would have said at the time.
He would come in, be there for 10 minutes, leave, not say much. So he didn't really do that much, but you could tell there was some off about him.
So if Bryan Kohberger had a propensity for bloody up close murder, and that has not yet been proved, he still may have needed like a trigger, something to set him off, like maybe a personal crisis, maybe a loss, something that might have made him lash out. Maybe like losing a job, like losing his job as a teaching assistant at Washington State University. And then with that, losing your funding for the doctoral studies program you're in the school, because it appears right now that that's what happened. We now have sources with direct knowledge of the termination letter that was sent to Bryan Kohberger. And tonight I want to read the letter to you in full. The letter is dated December the 19th, 2022. Starts this way. Mr. Kohberger, I am writing this letter to formally inform you of the termination of your teaching assistantship with the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology effective December 31st, 2022. In keeping with the WSU Graduate Student Handbook, chapters 9G2, remember that, and 12E3, remember that, Below is the list of events that led to you being deficient on the following contingency clause of your funding. Quote, maintaining satisfactory progress in fulfilling assistantship service requirements and duties. On September 23rd, 2022, you had an altercation with the faculty you support as a TA, Professor Snyder. I met with you on October 3rd to discuss norms of professional behavior. On October 21st, Professor Snyder emailed you about the ways in which you had failed to meet your expectations as a TA thus far in the semester. As a result, on November 2, Graduate Director Willits and I met with you to discuss an improvement plan, which you agreed to, and I shared with you in an email dated November 3rd. We met again December 7th, this time with a Professor Snyder, as well as Dr. Willits and I, to discuss your progress on the improvement plan. While not perfect, we agreed there was progress. On December 9th, there was another altercation with Professor Snyder, in which it became apparent that you had not made progress regarding professionalism, and about which I wrote to you on December 11th requesting a meeting. We met on December 19th, when I informed you of your termination as a TA for spring semester. So there's that. And we dug into the WSU Undergraduate Student Handbook, and we learned something that those two chapters, 9G2 to start with, that is the protocol for termination mid-semester or before the end of a period stipulated in a current offer letter. And that other one, 12E3, covers graduate and professional student complaint and grievance procedures.
Let's go back to Bryan Kohberger's younger years, his childhood, and his high school career. Apparently, there was drug abuse at a very young age, drug addiction at a very young age. There was awkwardness, depression, writing about the depression and feelings of not belonging on the internet, and that visual snow. Additionally, there were several accounts of Bryan Kohberger having bad interactions with several different women across a span of time. And of course, this continued into his time at Washington State University with Professor Snyder and some of his female students. The person speaking here is Jack Bayless. He is a childhood friend of Bryan Kohberger.
So my first impression of Bryan was he's just a pretty normal kid, you know? He was more of a quiet, funny guy, but not really quiet, just more of the calm guy.
Jack Bayless was a childhood friend of Bryan Kohberger. They met in middle school.
He was very curious. That's probably one of the bigger traits I remember from Bryan. What if reality is just a dream kind of stuff, you know? Just really profound kind of stuff, I guess.
According to Bayless, there was nothing different about his friendship with Bryan Kohberger, nothing any different than his friendship with anyone else.
We just hang around in the woods and do pre-teen, teenage things, you know, flipping rocks, looking for snakes, and hanging out and playing video games. I remember being at his house. It looked relatively cozy. It looked like a normal house. We had normal parents. If something was there that was off, I would have remembered it.
Jack Bayless talks about a condition that Bryan Kohberger reportedly suffered from, visual snow. This is a condition that Bryan Kohberger wrote about in his online postings as a teenager.
I know he also struggled with visual snow.
Apparently, this condition was very bothersome to Kohberger. It causes him to see static in his visual field. The New York Times and some online podcasters uncovered his writings about visual snow and other matters that bothered him. In one of Kohberger's online postings, he writes about being depressed and even suicidal.
I can't remember anything recent or anything from childhood. I'm just a blank soul living in the now. This whole thing has made me crazy. I feel like my life is pointless because people can think about times with parents' childhood memories and be happy. And I won't be able to. I am blank.
I'm actually just from a very rural area.
Bryan Kohberger grew up in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, surrounded by the beautiful Pocono Mountains. He's from a family of 5 with 2 sisters, Melissa and Amanda, his father, Michael, and his mother, Mary Ann. He went to high school at Pleasant Valley School in Brodesville, Pennsylvania, where he later worked as a security personnel. Bryan Kohberger was in school and living with his parents. His mother, Mary Ann, wrote articles in a local newspaper against abortion and for gun control. An eerie symbolic twist foreshadowing her son's fate, she also wrote an article against the death penalty, stating, sanctified murder is still just that, murder.
They were very involved parents. It seemed like he had a very supportive home environment, and the parents were always there if needed.
Donna Jozwiak is Bryan Kohberger's former guidance counselor at Pleasant Valley High.
Dad worked as a school mechanic. Mom was a paraprofessional. Very nice people. I met with them very frequently to discuss his career path. He stood out in the fact that he was very intelligent. He was very intellectual. He would delve into topics that are not on a shallow level. The truth of the matter is there were no red flags. He had very good grades. He seemed very focused, academically motivated, and would not give a school counselor any reason for concern.
In high school, Kohberger says he wants to become an Army Ranger. He finds a program at the Monroe Career and Technical Institute that suits his future goals.
I remember working with his family and him to fill out the application. He was enrolling in the Protective Services program, and he was very enthusiastic.
So Protective Services prepares students for a career in law enforcement, EMT, things like that. Police Academy Junior, putting on pretend handcuffs. They police the building just as though they would officers on patrol.
Speaking is Tanya Carmela Beers, an administrator at his former school.
Enrollment is very competitive. Protective Services is one of the most sought after programs. The cap is limited at 25. So that means for the 4 school districts in Monroe County, only 25 students could get in.
He needed to have good grades. He needed to have good attendance. He needed to have a discipline record that was non-existent.
We look at all the information that we can get about them because they are being given inside information about how police handle their business. Getting in can be tricky, but he was able to get into the program and he met all of those standards.
Bryan Kohberger clearly made an impression on both women that worked in his former schools.
I can actually see Bryan in my mind. I can see him walking because he's very tall.
I see him in his Protective Services uniform. I remember him dressed that way, patrolling the school with other students.
He carried the uniform very, very well, and you could tell that it was a real sense of pride for him to be doing that. This was something he was always interested in and something that he had always studied, and it was something that he had been looking at throughout even younger years.
He was very intrigued about the law and how he wanted to go into that field. He just wanted to help people.
Kohberger's teachers see and what's going on behind the scenes are two different things. Bryan Kohberger was repeatedly authoring some disturbing online posts.
I always feel as if I am not there, completely depersonalized. Crazy thoughts. I feel like nothing has a point to it. When I get home, I am mean to my family. I can say and do whatever I want with little remorse. Everyone hates me. Pretty much, I am an asshole. I am intelligent, but I feel the opposite. I say things I don't mean.
In stark contrast to Kohberger's career goals, he reportedly records a rap song about being the devil.
You are not my equal, you are equal, but I'm people, and now I'm going regal. Don't fuck with us.
Although the counselor and administrator from Kohberger's former schools had positive things to say about him, in retrospect, they see some of those things in a different light. And they also tell us about some troubling things that happened when he was in high school.
Sometimes people snap And you never know who's going to snap or why they snap.
When I think about how he took the program seriously, he was just very much needed to be in charge of everything. Like another student would watch the students for the day, be in charge of them as their patrol officer, if you will. He liked it when the other students answered to him, but it was to the nth degree. It was a little much. At that time, it seemed like he was just really zealous. But then when I think back about it, all of those things, knowing what I know now, are flags. There had been one or two incidents that had occurred that I had dealt with concerning him. For Bryan, the situations were subtle. They weren't really bold situations, but they rose to the degree as they began to mount.
Because this administrator is bound by a student confidentiality agreement, she cannot tell us all of the details of what happened, but she does disclose that some of the incidents that happened with Bryan Kohberger were in fact related to women.
Male students, you might not think necessarily of a female in protective services, but that was something that we recruited for. So some of the issues that arose were based on having a mixed population in that classroom. One of those incidents ultimately resulted in him being removed from that program.
Goes on to say that Kohberger was ultimately kicked out of protective services, that program that he worked so hard to gain entrance into. They transfer Kohberger into the HVAC program, and this program has no female students.
We were also a little bit more comfortable knowing that any possible continuation of negative behaviors would not occur in a situation where there were no females. It was concerning because there was such a dichotomy between what he presented academically and what he was living in an emotional, social aspect.
Remember, it's at the same time when Kohberger is making those disturbing online posts.
I am stuck in the depths of my mind, where I have to constantly battle my demons. I might spiral out of control and lose myself in the void. I felt like a criminal, but where was my record? I am blank. I have no opinion. I have no emotion. I have nothing. Can you relate?
He'd been a heavier guy, like a noticeably heavier guy. You could see it, you know. Wasn't like he was, just a little chubby. He was pretty up there.
Those who knew Kohberger in high school tell us about how he became really heavy. He had gained a lot of weight, and he was teased about his weight in high school. Some speculate that it was due to his weight gain that Kohberger eventually turned to drugs. They say heroin.
He lost a lot of weight, like really fast, but I feel like he was more confident in himself. I think he had to have vocalized his confidence, like, now I lost this weight, I'm probably more attractive.
Bryan Kohberger loses a lot of weight. They say 130 pounds, and apparently he did this by running and boxing. At the same time, he is writing about his transformation in the same online posts that were uncovered by podcasters and the New York Times.
I used to be this healthy blonde-haired boy with blue eyes, and in a few years, I have darker hair and darker eyes, half the body weight.
My brother was really good friends with him. My other friend, Brandon, was really good friends with him. I'm going to have a picture of him with him on the green screen as well. I'm shaking still, but anyway, let me show you. This is Brandon, the one I was just talking about. It's his wife, Brianna, and that's me. This was back in 2017. Obviously, that's Bryan. Still has the dead face that it's the eyes. I don't know. But when I spoke to him back in 2017, he was clean. He was a heavy heroin user back in high school, and it was just nice to see the kid clean up. And at that time, he said he was doing security detail. I believe it was out of school is what he told me. But he seemed like he was better. Obviously, that wasn't true. Here's another picture from a party that we had at Brandon's house. That's Bryan there. He used to be a bigger kid as well. But again, that's him. And then at the same wedding, I'm here, but he's back there. He was sitting at the same table as me and my mother. But he is back there enjoying a drink. I was sitting right next to him. We talked. He seemed fine. My mom sent me the old school yearbook. That was him. Bryan Kohberger, that's him. He went to Pleasant Valley. Graduated with, I think, my friend Christopher, a year younger than me. This is when he nonchalantly decided to make me drive him around the Poconos for heroin, and I had no idea. I thought I was just doing a nice deed because he needed something, and it turns out that he was getting heroin.
Friends say as time went on, Kohberger began to show them a different side. He began to become a little bit aggressive, or some might say very aggressive.
When he get drunk, he get kind of aggressive, kind of rowdy. There's one instance where he was trying to drive somewhere and we had to take his keys and hide them. So when I say aggressive, I mean we had to like physically like move him from the keys and prevent him from getting his keys.
He would just like put me in, he would like grapple me and like put me in headlocks and arm bars and stuff like that.
He started kind of branching out from the original group to hang out with a different group. That group, they did some sketchy drugs.
I met him through some friends and they told me that he was a little weird and he was a little socially awkward, I guess you could say. But he wasn't a bad guy. I got 6 years clean now. I work in treatment and everything, but back then I was using, and so that's how I know for a fact he was using. I've got high with him a couple times.
Teachers HVAC for the rest of his time at the Career and Technical Institute, and other issues arose that he decided to leave the school altogether and not complete his 12th grade year there.
After leaving the CTE program, Kohberger eventually finishes his high school degree at Pleasant Valley High online, and then apparently gets help for his heroin addiction.
I know he was in and out of rehab a couple times.
Around that same time, Bryan Kohberger is arrested for stealing his sister's iPhone and trying to sell it. His own father reports this crime. He is charged with a misdemeanor. Apparently, Kohberger completely kicks his addiction and looks for and gets a job as a security guard at his former high school, Pleasant Valley High.
I do know he was, always interested in law enforcement. That's usually kind of a dip your toes in the water kind of experience, is being a security guard for somewhere where you don't have to have that police training.
Kohberger tries his luck in the dating world, and he starts dating through the online app Tinder. He then meets a woman named Haley Willett, who has some interesting things to report about Bryan Kohberger.
So he wanted to watch another movie on Netflix, and I said, sure. He kept trying to touch me, not like inappropriately, just like trying to tickle me and like rub my shoulders and stuff. And I was like, why are you touching me, or what are you doing? And he would just like get super serious, and he's like, I'm not. And I'm like, you are though. And he's like, I'm not touching you. Kind of like trying to gaslight me into thinking that he didn't touch me, which was weird. But then I was like, I'm just gonna run to the bathroom quick. And he was like, okay. And then he followed me to the bathroom, which I thought was kind of weird. So like in the dorm, there was like a shared bathroom. He didn't go in with me, but like he stood outside the door, and like, I don't know, I just thought that was weird. And I was like, I need to get this dude to leave. Like, just not into it. So I proceeded to pretend to throw up to get him to leave. It wasn't because I was scared of him or like thought he would hurt me if I asked him to leave. It was just mostly because I'm socially awkward, didn't know how to ask him to leave. So that's what I did. He ended up messaging me on Tinder.
And reportedly at that time, he tells Haley that she has good birthing hips. She ends up calling him a stage 5 clinger. There's another account that was reported in the New York Post from Seven Sirens Brewery in Pennsylvania by the manager Jordan Sergelenek. And this is what that article said. It says, several months ago, Kohberger visited the Seven Sirens Brewing Company several times. Harassing the women who worked there, owner Jordan Sergelenek, age 34, told NBC News. Kohberger, who usually sat alone at the bar observing and watching, stood out for his interactions with employees and patrons, Sergelenek said. The brewery, which scans everyone's ID, has a system in which staff members can add notes or comments about a patron that will pop up on the screen whenever the ID is scanned again, Sergelenek told the network. Staff put in there, and this is a quote of what staff put in there, hey, this guy makes creepy comments. Keep an eye on him. He'll have 2 or 3 beers and then just get a little too comfortable, end quote, he said. Kohberger would ask women, staff, or customers who they were with at the brewery and where they live, Serial Nick said. If the women were interested, quote, he would get upset with them a little bit, end quote. In one instance, Serial Nick recalled that he called an employee a bitch when she declined to answer his questions. Serial Nick said he was forced to confront Kohberger during his final visit to the brewery. Quote, I went up to him and I said, hey, Bryan, welcome back. We appreciate you coming back. I just wanted to talk to you real quick and make sure you're going to be respectful this time and that we're not going to have any issues, end quote, Serial Nick said, and told the alleged murderer, who was stunned. Quote, he was shocked that I was saying that. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. You totally have me confused, end quote. Kohberger stayed for just 1 beer and then never returned, Serial Nick said. The interactions happened months ago, Serial Nick noted. At the time, Kohberger likely was a student at nearby DeSalle University, where he graduated with his master's degree, I may note, in 2022. Shocked former classmates remembered the accused killer as being an intelligent student in high school, but was often bullied and could, in turn, be a bully to others himself. They said he struggled with heroin addiction and weight loss. It was bad, Kohberger's former high school classmate Sarah Healy told Fox News Digital on Friday. Quote, there was definitely something off about him, like we couldn't tell exactly what it was. I remember one time I was walking in the hallway and he stopped me and was like, do you want to hang out? But Bryan was bullied a lot and I never got a chance to say something to defend him because he would always run away, she added. While in college, Kohberger eventually reconnects with his friend Jack Bayless, and Jack says they had a really great relationship then. He talks about his former drug abuse, the dating scene, and his career aspirations.
To me personally, he really opened up more in his later college years. We're talking more than we talked in high school. He called me fairly often.
Bayless shares private messages from around this time.
He goes and says, I like forensic psychology and studying criminals. I don't care about the money. And he's saying, I would assist in the capture of a violent criminal for sure, but getting a job like that is difficult. I'm thinking more along the lines of dealing with high-profile offenders.
Kohberger also talks about what he believes is the root of his heroin addiction.
I only knew this when I was in a deep suicidal state, and he says, I've been depressed for so long that I developed a weird sense of meaning. So the thing we talk about a lot, the dating scene, it just got kind of just really hard, but he was just having a time, getting ghosted a lot, talking to a girl and then wondering, why didn't she text back ever? And then also be like, yeah, I was talking to this girl or this girl was cute and I thought we hit it off and we didn't, I guess. So you'd vent about stuff like that to me. I think he just felt frustrated.
Psychiatrist Chris Mahandi analyzes Kohberger's relationship with women.
As we look at Bryan Kohberger, we start to learn about him as a person who is described by others as arrogant, having haughty attitudes, and that's certainly a personality structure that is consistent with one who might not look at others, including women, as his equal.
It seems that Bryan Kohberger definitely has established a pattern of behavior. Remember his interaction with his female professor, which was one of the reasons he was released from his teaching assistant job at Washington State University, which is one of the reasons he lost his funding and got kicked out of the program. And his neighbor, who he broke into her apartment and moved around her furniture and offered to install a security camera. That lucky neighbor. There was also this interaction with a female police officer.
I think you know why I stopped you. You ran the red light.
What actually happened was I was stuck in the middle of the intersection.
Yeah,
so I was
behind you the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah. But in that situation, the best thing to do then would be back up.
You're just supposed to wait behind the white line. Drivers do it all the time, but
it never even occurred to me that was actually something wrong. I'm just curious about the law. I don't mean to
Oh, no, yeah, I can find it for you.
The last incident with Bryan Kohberger's professor is less than 2 weeks before Moscow, Idaho was changed for eternity.
Moscow police have confirmed they found 4 people dead in this neighborhood just off of King Road, south of the University of Idaho.
Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin.
Police in the school have insisted that this was an isolated crime of passion.
Whether or not Bryan Kohberger is going to be found guilty of committing this heinous crime is yet to be found. His trial is currently in the pre-trial phase of the procedure, and we do not know when that trial will actually begin. Many people believe that Bryan Kohberger is hands down all the way 100% guilty, while there are people out there who believe that Bryan Kohberger is not guilty or that he did not commit this crime alone. Please leave a comment below and let us know what you think. We all want to know what you think, and your opinion matters. Please click like and subscribe, and we hope that you come back to see us again on What's the Obsession? True Crime.